second year. It's been a federal holiday. The Juneteenth events happening all across the country as we speak, and there are concerts and barbecues and all sort of outdoor events, but we wanted to have a focus on economics. And so we got some great folks lined up, some entrepreneurs. We got some elected officials as well talking about what's happening on the city, county, state, and federal level to drive opportunities for African Americans. Commissioner Ellis, I just saw him. Where is he? He was over here. All right. So now see, Commissioner Ellis is smart. He doesn't come when the other politicians come. He comes early so he can actually talk a little bit. So before I bring our entrepreneurs up, I'm going to go ahead and bring him up quickly because I wanted to hear from him. So Commissioner, go ahead and just take a seat right here because the whole point of this is to talk about what's happening with African Americans economically. And there are a lot of people who out here who talk about reparations. What I keep reminding them that there are literally billions and billions and billions of dollars that are being spent right now that we are not necessarily accessing. Federal government spends $560 billion a year on contracts. Black folks get 1.67%. And so you're one of the commissioners in Harris County. What is happening with the county to ensure that black folks are participating economically in the billions being spent?
Roland, happy Juneteenth. It's good to see you back home, and Juneteenth is an appropriate time to talk about economic opportunities for black people because some of us still haven't gotten the word that we're free. I see Sonny Messiah out there with the Houston Defender and her husband Jody Giles. You know, in a lot of ways we attribute Maynard Jackson in particular with being the father of minority business enterprise programs on the local level. Perrin Mitchell, obviously on the federal level with all that he did, former congressman out of Baltimore. In terms of Harris County and Houston, a lot is going on, but not nearly enough. We did get the word a little late. City of Houston established a program for minority and women-owned businesses in 1984. I'm proud to say that under the current mayor, Sylvester Turner, the numbers for the city of Houston really are off the charts, higher than they have ever been.
He's joining us in the next hour. We're going to have that conversation.
In every category, and I want to give him praise for that. It takes a lot of effort to do that. In order to have a program focused on minority women-owned businesses, you have to go through some hoops. We're in America now. Just that's the story of it. You have to do something called a disparity study. I always give people this background. It came out of Richmond. So Maynard Jackson stopped the airport from being built in Atlanta, Georgia. He was elected mayor, but didn't have control of the council, and so he could not set up a program that was enforceable. So he essentially just stopped the trucks, the bulldozers.
He actually said tumbleweeds will roll down these runways before I allow it to be built without black participation.
A bold black man. I enjoy pointing out that's why when he left office as mayor of Atlanta, he had to get a job as a bond lawyer with a firm out of Chicago.
They wouldn't hire him.
Chapman and Cutler, I think.
So when before he became mayor, blacks in Atlanta were getting 0.0012% of all city contracts. Not 1, not 0.5%, not 0.25%, 0.0012.
0.0012. Maynard's the grandfather of it. The reason why the most successful black businesses in America tend to be in Atlanta is because of Maynard Jackson. Other cities, Detroit, because of Coleman Young and because of automotive industry. New York, because New York is just New York, the financial capital. But cities where we had the political clout first is where businesses went. Along comes Richmond, Virginia. Famous case, Croson case, goes to the Supreme Court. Peanuts, might have been for a couple $100,000. Toilet fixtures inside City Hall. In this case, challenging affirmative action programs in the business arena was working its way up. Mayor Maynard Jackson had a nephew, I think his name was Richardson, who was on city council. I remember my mentor, Mickey Leland, had me in Richmond for something. I met with the councilman and said, look, why don't y'all settle this thing? It's like that Bakke case, remember that one?
Yep,
when
out of California.
Yeah, when I was in law school in Texas, we tell people in California, why don't y'all settle it? Don't mess this thing up for the rest of the country. Of course, if you were in California, you didn't feel that way. So in Richmond, they took it to the Supreme Court. They ruled that before you can have a program focused on minority women-owned businesses, you have to do this thing called a disparity study. So you got to spend a bunch of money like reconstructing your tax returns. And then if you see there's a disparity, then you have to have a, quote, narrowly tailored remedy. Now, I'm telling this for a reason. That Croson case came down in, I don't know, maybe sometime in the late 80s. So city of Houston, most cities, Atlanta, set up programs. You didn't have to do this study. Then along comes this Croson case. So in Texas, of all places, Ann Richards was governor. They had 2 blacks in the Senate, Ada British Johnson out of Dallas, me out of Houston. We slipped some language in to do a disparity study in Texas, $1 million. I'll never forget, Governor Ann Richards called me and said, Rodney, Senator, do you think we need to spend $1 million to figure out if your people, Hispanics and women, been discriminating? Don't you think, Senator, we can figure that out before spending $1 million? I said, yes, ma'am, but the United States Supreme Court requires it. So Texas did a disparity study. We continue to do it. The numbers are not what they ought to be, but it's the first major state in the country to do a disparity study. City of Houston kept its program in place. They pretty much used what was in the state's disparity study. Harris County didn't. When I became a county commissioner, I pushed for it. Sonny Masai here in the audience helped a lot, raised a lot of hell to force our county to do it. The numbers came back. The black numbers, Hispanic numbers, South Asian, white numbers maybe came at about 6-7% just off the top of my head.
In one of the most diverse counties in the country.
The most diverse county in the country.
6 to 7%.
Yeah.
Not each.
No.
Total.
And if you don't do the study, then you cannot set up a program. The county has set up a program now. Our numbers are considerably better. I'll send them to you. I just don't have them off the top of my head. But then I was so angry with the way my colleagues treated me back then. I was the only Democrat, only person of color on Commissioner's Court. I think I was just out there ticked off and had a lot of free time, a lot of bright ideas, but didn't have the votes. So I decided I'd go after my transit authority, my port authority, and we started shaking the tree. Now our port authority has done a disparity study. They hadn't done one.
Right.
That numbers were a little worse than the county's numbers. African-American numbers tend to be the worst. Metro had a consent decree, but it expired. At one point, they got fired. Maybe back when Lee Brown was in or Kathy Whitmire, they'd been doing such a good job on helping minority and women-owned businesses at the transit authority in Houston. They were challenged in federal court. Same guy that's handling this case that's before the Supreme Court now, Edward Bloom, was challenging that case in Houston. He's from Houston, about to strike down a bunch of stuff on the federal level again. But we went after Harris Health. I'm glad to see my folks from Harris Health here. That's who I was talking to. They did a disparity study. That number came back 0 for African Americans. They are
zero?
Not .002, 0. So I'm saying, you know, that's where most people of color get their health care. You would assume an African American could get a contract mowing the grass. That's what my daddy used to do, cleaning the sheets. It was ridiculous.
Now, the reason, and we talk about this on the show all the time, and the reason as you walk through that, and we're going to be talking about this with panelists later, is getting the public to understand we're talking billions of dollars, taxpayer dollars. So black folks are funding a system and getting absolutely nothing or a small amount in return. And what I keep trying to tell our folks, those are existing dollars. That's not, let's figure out how much to give folks in the check. No, that's literally money right there. And I'm saying, go access the money that's already there.
You remember what I started off saying? We celebrate Juneteenth. Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, I think in September. It was to go into effect in January, New Year's Day. The rest of the country knew. Slave owners here knew. And the slaves knew. It wasn't the grapevine, it was the cotton vine. I can assure you they knew that they should have been freed. And there are a whole lot of people, you know, I love that quote that they won't give Sister Harriet Tubman credit for. You know, there's that quote that was attributed to her saying that she could have freed another 100 or so if only they had known they were slaves. But by and large, that's still a challenge here. None of our school districts, there may be 30, Google it, 32, 34 school districts and community colleges in the Harris County. Not a single one had done a disparity study. Not a single one was keeping the data on minority and women-owned businesses. So at the county, under the new leadership, I'm real proud of my colleagues. One of us happens to be black, you're looking at him. 3 Hispanics. Now it's 4 Ds, 1 R. Changed the face of county government, which is why they like to get us out of here, by the way.
So you're saying that now having 4 Democrats, 1 Republican, all this stuff is changing. That's for all the folks who say voting don't matter.
Voting matters, but you also got to have Democrats with some guts.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, I always like pointing this out around Juneteenth, you know what I mean? Because it took that long for the word to get here for us to be freed. You know, just remember, you got to have folks with some guts willing to stand up. It's
right.
ridiculous that went so long and nobody asked about the study. And I want to go back to this community college, by the way. We have Robert E. Lee Community College. They call it Lee, but it's Robert E. Lee. We got San Jacinto Community College. We have Houston Community College and Lone Star Community College. Only one has agreed to do a disparity study. And might I add, the county commission that I'm on, we put up $2 million to seed funding their disparity studies because only one stepped up. We pay for the whole damn thing. Where are the other 3? So
which means that we've got work to do. Go to those other 3.
The school districts, Houston Independent School District, it breaks my heart that they were taken over by the state. The interim leadership reached out to me and said, look, you know, we want to be able to talk to you. Well, sure, I talk. Talk is what I do. I'm from Sunnyside. We talk. Hey, I'm one of the talk back brothers. I'm going to do some talking now. I said, look, out of all things you do, I'm not an expert on education. I think I know as much as you all know, but I do think it's deplorable that Houston Independent School District does not even collect the numbers. The school board and the superintendent agreed to do it. I'm told they decided not to partake because the takeover was imminent. So I've challenged politely the new leadership. The least you ought to do. That's an easy overture.
So HISD is not collected.
They don't collect it, and you
So
got to do this
y'all hearing
study.
the homework we got.
Yeah, you got to do this study.
Right.
Go collect the data, and don't come up with some Mickey Mouse stuff. Hire a legitimate firm to go do a disparity study.
Right.
Now, look, here's the other side. I want to mention this because you got business people here. Jody Giles is in the audience. Jody and I were in business together. Remember, I used to have a little investment banking firm.
Was not little, but go ahead.
Here's what a lot of the firms in here do. Everybody wants to be the chairwoman, Mr. President, the CEO. You know, we got to argue about the name. When Jody and Richard Ramirez and I, we arguing, well, what are we going to name the firm? Well, it's real simple. It ought to be RJR Securities, Rodney, Jody, and Richard. Then Jody going to go tell Sonny, oh, no. This needs to be Jody, Rodney, and Richard Ramirez. Then Richard Ramirez going to argue, tell this, well, no, this is going to be Richard, Jody, and Rodney. So I said, no, here's what we're going to do. RJR works. I'm going to go tell my spouse is Rodney, Jody, and Richard. Richard, you go tell your spouse is Richard, Jody, and Rodney. Jody, you go tell Sonny, your wife, is Run, Jody, Run. You know, I was thinking about Jesse and they both Run, Jody, Run. But here's the point. We spent all that time arguing about the name. Who get the credit before we get the money? And then R.J. Nabisco blocked us.
All that arguing. And
nobody
thought.
R.J. Nabisco said, no, you can't do that. This is when you had to go to the yellow pages to get a name. They didn't have internet. Jody was at 1985, 86, whenever we started. I'm in Atlanta, and I saw that Apex Museum. You know, you go through the yellow pages. That's why so many firms, AAA, 4A, 2A, AB this, you know, trucking company, Apex Securities. And it was clear we did it. Jody left to get a good job at First Boston. Had it not been for that black and brown owned firm, he wouldn't have gotten that job at First Boston. Richard eventually left and ended up at Goldman Sachs. If it hadn't been for that little black and brown firm, he couldn't. I had to stay because I was in politics. Then I sold it eventually. But look, some of these folks got to merge. We were hustling a deal once, Jody, in Jacksonville, Florida, Jackalack, trying to do a bond deal. And we knew our competitors had more people for the presentation. I see one of them said he had about 5 people. We had done a listening to people's conversation. So I said, how are we going to walk in here in this Richard, Jody, and Rodney? And other folks have 5 people. I go buy some suits, get some students at Florida A&M, dress them up. You know, back then, you could say your business is scalable. Now with the internet, you can't do that. Here's the point. Some of these black law firms, you need to merge. Some of these black, the
Yes.
reason the biggest black construction firm used to be Thacker out of Atlanta. Thacker Construction from Maynard Jackson era at the airport. Merge these firms.
Yes.
You got to figure out how you put all of them. Most people who make money, you know what they do with it, Roland? Spend it.
Yep.
You got to invest money back in your company. And you got to figure out how you just can't go scale it up overnight.
Right.
So my point is, in Harris County, that was your question. The county, the port, the transit authority, at least one community college is coming online. Harris Health, I might have mentioned. Missouri City has followed us. Fort Bend County, all setting up programs. And then don't get into this stuff about it's only for people from here. Sometimes when I was in business, they'd give us enough, they'd get sick of us kind of working our politics, showing up, we black, we brown. They give us bonds at Denver Airport, damn near put us out of business because we couldn't sell the bonds. And then you go out of business. You got to merge some of these firms. Right. And that's how you get to be big enough. So it's a two-way street. Don't just show up with a pickup truck and a shovel and think, with the politics, we're going to get you a contract and they're going to take these French cuffs off of me and put on handcuffs because you can't perform.
Right.
So I just want to mention, it's a long way to go. It's a tremendous opportunity. The Biden administration, I want to give them credit. To the extent they can under the law, this case that's coming down, Harvard and University of North Carolina, that case could go beyond impacting affirmative action in higher education. I was with John Britton in D.C. Talking a couple of days earlier this week. If there's language in there that impacts minority business opportunities, then we could all end up having to go to Webb, California. Then you go do other things. You do outreach. But here in Harris County, it's a golden opportunity. I want to encourage your listeners, open up a shop. Richard and Jody and I had to do business in other cities because I had conflicts as a council member. Couldn't do business with the city. Had conflicts with the state. I had to go to other cities. And I want to tell people here, if somebody comes into Houston from Detroit, we did business in Detroit. We did business in Chicago. It's okay. We had to open offices up there.
So it's also called joint ventures.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
You know, but figure out on your side, make sure you're prepared. Don't just, look, I think by and large, most African-American politicians, in my judgment, are the ones who jump on the table and go crazy. You know, we fight the hardest, but generally, when the programs are set up, we are the ones who have suffered the most, fought the hardest to make changes, yet have benefited the least.
Right.
And I get that. You know, I hope that's more than our mission in life. But I want to encourage the entrepreneurs who are listening to this, you know, make sure you look at mergers. And last point, I remember being in high school, San Jacinto, 1969, my 10th grade year. They had me take a little standardized test. They said, Rodney, the test shows you be good at bricklaying. Here my dad, a yard man, mama, nurse. Hot son, that ain't for me. I'm getting in the house, telling jokes, get a little, oh no, I'm gonna go to college. I said, no, maybe the test shows I'd be good at owning a brick company.
There you go.
And, you know, I was angry because they wanted to push me into a trade. I look back at my life now with the ambition, the drive that I had to get from where I was to where I am. If I had learned how to lay bricks, I'd own the damn brick company.
There you go.
You know, so I want to say to folks, it's not all about going to college. I just got air conditioning work done, $9,000. That cost more money than it cost me when I got divorced the first time.
The first time. Commissioner, it's good to see you. I appreciate it. Thank you so very much. We're going to bring up, put your hands together, Commissioner Rodney Ellis. It's a great way to start. Let's bring our panelists up. Our first panelist, y'all come on up here. We got Reginald Martin, Lamont Events. We got Sonny Messiah Giles, Houston Defender. Ashley Ray, come on up. Y'all take a seat. Y'all sit wherever y'all want to sit. Ain't no assigned seating. Ain't no assigned seating. I want to get the name right. So pronounce the name of your company again. Okay, baby, it's the microphone. Come on now, you got it. Come on.
I thought I was mic'd up.
You used to do media.
I thought I was mic'd up. Excuse me, but Mommy Wada Organics.
All right, so the reason I constructed this panel this way, so first of all, Ashley just started her company. We have now two folks who took over companies, one that was family, and then one that wasn't family, but then continuing it. And the reason I wanted to do it that way is because one of the biggest mistakes, I think, and Commissioner Ellis talked about this here, a lot of folk want to start something, they want to start something, they don't want to buy something. They don't want to merge. They don't want to do any of that. And so there are multiple ways to actually begin a business. When I started my show, I literally went to every major black-owned media company, and I said, look, I said, let's partner. I'm doing something none of y'all doing, so I can bring something to you. You have something I already have. Nobody would partner. None of them. Urban One, Black Enterprise, Essence, Blavity. Yeah, I ain't got no problem naming them. I met with all of them. So I was like, fine, I'm gonna go ahead and do it. But I made the attempt first to actually do this. And so I wanna start this off. Sonny, I wanna start with you. How did you acquire the Houston Defender, and why?
You said how?
How?
The decision that I made was to look at what the marketplace looked like. I wanted to buy a radio station originally, Roland. It was not a newspaper. I went and, all the advice says establish relationships with 3 people, a lawyer, a banker, and a CPA. So I did those 3. When it came time for the offer to actually buy the Defender, I went to the banker and I said, okay, I got this great opportunity. He said, Sonny, come into my office. I knew that was a clue, right? So he says, you have 3 strikes against you. I said, okay, tell me what those strikes are. He says, 1, you're black, 2, you're female, and 3, you're not married. I was 27 years old at the time. I said, okay, the only thing, I can't do anything about being black. I can't do anything about being female. What if I marry a rich man? He said, no way. If you really want to do this, you're going to have to take a calculated risk. And so he said, go put it down in black and white, spell out what the pros and cons are, decide if you can do that. And so with that, I put together creative financing, Roland. And what I mean by that, I thought about Sears and doing payments to Mr. Richardson. He said, oh no, baby, I can't do that. I said, okay. So when we met, I asked him how he came up with the amount of money that he wanted me to pay. And he said, well, it's my car loan, it's my house payment, it's a lien I have. He went down this whole list, right? So I said, and he told me how much cash. Well, I had borrowed that much cash from relatives, friends, and everybody I knew. So I said, okay, Mr. Richardson, what if I pay you the cash and assume all your indebtedness? He said, you can't do that legally. I said, if I can, will you sign? He said, yeah, if you can find a lawyer that'll put it together, go for it. I found a lawyer, we put it together, and in 1981 in October, at the age of 27, I bought the Defender. What I'm saying to you is, if you come up with creative ways, you can figure it out. There are 3 ways you're gonna really learn. 1 is you read the books, you go to the webinars, you look at YouTube. 2 is you go talk to smart people. Wisdom warriors, what I call them, but also the people that you want to create relationships with that you can leverage for your
Who are
business.
not necessarily in the same space that you're in.
Exactly. In fact, what I did was I made a list of 25 people in my industry and 25 influencers in the community. Mickey Leland was one of them. You had Mac Hanna, John B. Coleman. For people who are in Houston, you know those old names. They were old money. And as a result of that, but I also had Dick Johnson, who was the publisher of the Chronicle, and I also had John Johnson, who was the publisher of Ebony. And folks said, you're not going to Chicago, girl. I said, if I can get in the door. It took me 3 years, but I got in the door, and he gave me the best advice I ever had, and that was, don't buy a printing press. You're not in the printing business. You're in the publishing business. So as a result, what I'm saying to you is do the reading and the webinars and the YouTubes. Establish the relationships, because that's where the biggest power. It's not just about what you know, it's about who you know. That will open more doors for you. And then 3 is you're gonna fail, baby. So when you fail, take time to look at why did you fail. And I don't mean just, oh wow, I failed, I did 1, 2, 3, 4. I mean dig deep so that the next time that comes up, you don't make the same mistake. I think those are my key points for relationships, though, are the fundamental part. And so with that, I will say that, make that list of 50 people, 25 folks in your industry, 25 folks in the community that can impact your business. Go meet them, talk to them, ask them for their wisdom and their wise advice, and then go do your thing. Remember to do you, though, because I think part of the problem is folks, family and friends say, oh, you need to do this and oh, you need to do that. But you need to do you, baby, because you know who you are and you know what you want to do and how you want to do it. And when the mistakes come, only person you have to blame is you.
All right, appreciate. Yep, give it up, give it up. Next up, Reginald Martin Jr. I call him Reggie. We're brothers. So I already know his story.
You see, they look alike.
Well, you know, a little bit. That's some people say. And so you did not go to you did not go to college to run a catering company, but ended up that way. Right. So tell folk again how that happened.
So my mom and dad was like, they didn't go to college. We were first generation college students, me and my brother and my sister. We're all Aggies, and I have two other sisters. But college was college, or, you know, there was no other option. So I ended up majoring in agriculture because that was the closest I was going to get to food. So I got a degree in agriculture out of A&M. Always wanted to be a chef. My grandmother started Lamont Catering.
And you were a business major.
Yeah, I was a business major. And
but
then
Alvin Lark said.
Yes, I was a business major at the time. I was one of probably 4,000 students in that program. And then Dr. Alvin Lark, who ended up being one of my mentors, an alpha there, was like, look, you want to be in business? Why don't you come over to the agribusiness side? So there's another pathway to get to where you want to get to, but with more hands-on relationships with both your mentors, with your professors. So I switched majors from business to agribusiness. My first job out of A&M was with DuPont Chemicals. So I got a chance to go work for this Fortune 500 company.
Hold on, before you go there, I want to go back to again.
Yes.
Something Lark said. A lot of black folks who were there were like, I am not majoring in no damn agriculture. But he said, it's a whole lot of money and few of us.
That's true. And so to that point, obviously, it was probably my first step as, one, we were 700 black students out of about 36,000, right, back in 1986, 87. Now, if that's 700 plus out of 36,000, imagine how many blacks was in the agriculture department. I was probably like 5 out of about 1,000. When I got my first job in DuPont agriculture business, there were only 30 black sales reps in the entire country. And DuPont at that time was probably one of the top 3. So you have DuPont, BASF, Dowie Landco. Those are some of the major, what we call agribusiness companies. And so I was always in this space of being one of the few African Americans in a very white-dominated type business, right? Learning a lot, but not having a lot of support around me. So it was both good and both bad. You really had to figure a lot of things on your own. I remember when I flew up to Wilmington, Delaware, interviewed, they gave me an offer. I was actually scared to call my dad because I knew the offer they gave me as a 22-year-old was more than my dad was making at the time. And my dad was a union guy. He worked in the railroad. And as far as I was concerned, he had really a good job. You know, it's blue collar. Commissioner Ellis was talking about there's other pathways to supporting your family and having great jobs. And I thought he had a good job. And then I realized when they gave me my offer, I was like, that's more than what my dad and my mom makes. And it was a weird dynamic because my parents are always supportive.
My first offer was not what he was making. My first offer was half of what they were paying his ass. What was the first offer?
So the first offer was I think about $32,000 plus company car plus expense account, all that stuff. So
mine was $20,100. I told them, you got to give me $22,100 before I take the job. They gave me the $22,000, but yes.
So I had this love for food. I lived my vision of food through my first 6 years working for DuPont, came back home, and I really always wanted to relaunch our family business, Lamont Catering. It was a mom and pop business, but I had this passion for food. My first champagne bottle I opened, I was 9 years old. We did, when Commissioner Ellis was talking about Mickey Leland, so I remember we did banquets where Mickey Leland was a key speaker. We catered. My mother. So my grandmother was was really good friends with Sophronia Thompson. They traveled everywhere.
They were running buddies.
They were running buddies. So we Lamont Catering usually catered a lot of the black political speaking events at various community centers, from Barrett Station to Houston.
All over. And just
to
so y'all
Beaumont.
know, we had a meeting in D.C. with Congressman Mickey Leland, and I was at Texas A&M, and there was 2 other black guys with us, and I was like, listen, we go into the meeting, y'all shut the hell up. I got this. One, he went to Wheatley. I went to Yates. Don't talk about yeah. And so I walk in, and so we start trash talking Yates and Wheatley. And then I said, Imelda Lamont was my grandmother. Oh, man, I love her food. He started going on. That's why I said, I just need y'all to shut up. We got this. I said, that's going to set the meeting up. So, yeah, but the whole point is utilizing the family relationships, no matter what Sonny was talking about, relationships, how it can impact.
And those are relationships in the black community, right? And so fast forward, my wife and I get married, and she marries into this business. She's a Rice graduate, so her and I run the company now, Lamont Kitchen.
She the black sheep of the family. She a Rice graduate.
We love you, Miranda.
We got 5 Texas A&M graduates in the family. But go ahead.
So 2 years into our marriage, we get this opportunity, and this really defined us because this was 20 plus years ago. Not who we are today, but 20 plus years ago. Rice University comes to us and they say, there's this place, this venue called the Baker Institute. So Secretary of State James Baker, his Public Policy Institute is at Rice University. And the 2 trustees who are on this planning event, says, we want to do something different. Now, keep in mind in Houston at that time, not today, I want you to think 20 years ago, catering was all out of people's homes. Catering is not what you see now. There were 2 firms in Houston that were real caterers. Jackson Hicks and Benny Farrells. So Benny Farrells was the African-American firm. It was Jackson Hicks that did everything else, right? That's the only 2 you would ever use to do a seated dinner for 900 plus people with the Vice President of the United States, Dick Cheney, as a keynote speaker. So they asked us to come in, do a tasting, and I'm like, okay, right, whatever, we're gonna do this tasting. Okay, we do a tasting.
So, just like the Osteens did, we went to do the tasting for them.
Yeah, so we did the same thing. The Osteen family, they asked us to come in and do a tasting because they needed a new caterer to do all their food. This was all happening all within a 2 to 3 year period, and we're like, okay, whatever, sure, all right. So, and I had gone to culinary school, obviously graduated from A&M. My wife graduated from Rice. She had a background working in events at the Museum of Fine Arts and the Orange Show, which again, places that African Americans don't normally work in, but we're getting great experience. And there's this firm called Richard Flowers and Associates. So Richard Flowers and Associates is at that time, the event planner in Houston. All the decor, all the linen, and more importantly, all the florals. Well, my grandmother was a florist, so we talked about how we started, and he wanted to partner. So this event at Rice is like, hey, we're gonna be the event production company. We want you to be the caterer. And we're like, okay. So we have a second tasting. Well, my wife is in the hospital because she had got bitten by some mosquito and she had bacterial meningitis, and I have to go do this by myself. And I'm the chef. I don't do the front stuff. That's her. So I do this second tasting, and we're like, okay, I did it, babe. I think it went well. They asked questions, but I'm still not thinking. We appreciate you asking us to come to the table, trying us out. And so about another month later, it was like, we're going to use you guys. We're like, really? You serious? This is a plated dinner for 950 people, multi-courses. It's a 4-day event. They raised at that event alone $3.5 million. And I was talking about this guy, Richard Flowers. During this whole process, he gets bought out by Tillman Fertitta. So now I'm partnering with not just Richard Flowers, I'm partnering with Tillman Fertitta 20 years ago. At this event, we had 30 chefs working in the back. I'm the executive chef. We had 200 plus wait staff. My wife was doing the pre-reception with Vice President Cheney. 41 was there, Bush was there. We had all the lead journalists around the world was there covering this event. And I'm like, still can't believe we're doing this. And it was a magnificent opportunity. In fact, when they finally called and says, okay, we're ready to move forward, they're like, so we're gonna put a deposit down. And it was like $75,000. And they wanted to put on a credit card. And my wife and I looked at each other like, can you really put $75,000 on a credit card? We were like, we had never actually processed that before. This was 20 years ago. And so, needless to say, it was flawless, right? So anyone who mattered in the space of giving, donating, museums, you name it, they were at this event and all the festivities for the weekend. Got great write-ups in the newspaper, and when it was all over, it was like this. Well, that was a great experience. I don't know if I ever want to do that again, because you live through it, and then you quickly realize this. And so back to what Commissioner Ellis was saying, you can't do this by yourself. We realized that we spent $200,000 on needing new vans and equipment just to execute this event, but you have to do that kind of event every week or every month to sustain, right? So we invested all this money to make it happen. We made money, invested in, we realized about 3 months later, we were still doing events. You're not gonna do that kind of a gala every week, but we're like, man, if you're gonna operate in this space, you have to have a lot of capital, you have to have a lot of staff, you have to continue to go look for new opportunities, because most of your clients, nope, we're not using those linen. I mean, they literally will not use re-linen. They won't reuse floor, like brand new stuff. It's only maybe about, what's the black book in Houston? It was like this social book they used to have. It was called.
Green book?
No, not the green. It was a black social book. It's a book. It's a social book where every major nonprofit that does galas is in this event. Like, you know who these people are. Nobody ever wants to see the same linen, the same floors, the same centerpiece of the event. It all has to be bespoke.
I mean, those who's who,
Those who's, it's like a who's book of
Yeah.
societies
Yeah.
of nonprofits.
Gotcha.
And so you realize every time you buy something, you have to find someone else willing to pay to use that, because the clients who really have the big money don't want to see that it's like a new season every week or every month. And we realize, man, this is a very expensive sort of space to operate in. So going through that after a couple of years, we recognize that, okay, we're really good at doing what we call museum quality food, right? We can do museum quality events, but do it our way, be authentic to who we are. So we settle into that 200 to 300 person type event, where we own all the china, all the equipment, we can sufficiently give you staff, execute it at a Le Mans standard, and then so we move from the gala type events to doing more museum, nonprofit fundraising events, and that's sort of where we found our niche as an organization. Our sweet spot is 200 to 300 events. Yes, when the Super Bowl comes, we can do an event for 4,000 people. You want bars, that's easy, but really full service, gourmet events, that's sort of where we found our space. The other area we recognize is that despite being an African-American owned company, we don't have a lot of African-American clients. We don't. And so we strike a really fine balance, because it's not that we don't want to work with our community. It's a certain cost to do what we do at a certain level, and we only do it one way, right? So like when my brother came yesterday and said, what's up with the food? And we ain't really talk about it that much, because if y'all know Roland, people think I talk to him all the time. I don't, right? Roland is still a text away from me. If I need to talk to him, he know what the 911 code is, like, okay, I need to talk to you. But people think that I can just get him on my phone, and it really doesn't work that way. Sometimes I got to call his assistant just like everybody else if I got to book him. So he come into town yesterday, is like, what y'all decide about the food? And I'm like, you said you were going to get back to Miranda. And so yesterday at 5:30, you see, Sonny knows.
First of all, I know what I do.
That's rolling.
I know what I do. And it was like, you got the food? Got it. All right.
So we made it happen with very little time. And
What you want to eat?
So
That's what you do.
So the next phase that we realized is that we were very good at mobilizing with very short time. So where we've become experts in is in government contracting. So we are very successful at local, state, and federal contracting. When Harvey hit, we were asked to activate for the city of Houston, and we partnered with a nonprofit. We got the old Star of Hope mission open in about maybe 2 weeks. It felt like 5 days, because the city council said, we have to move all these people out of the Georgia Brown to the old Star of Hope, 300 homeless like the worst of the worst in terms of they didn't have an ability to go rent apartments because they didn't have credit. So they didn't have a place to place them, but they needed to get them out of the Georgia Brown. And they said, Lamont, will you partner with this company? We need 3 meals a day, 300 residents. It starts in 2 days. Okay, gotcha.
But Reggie, isn't that why it's so important, those contracts that Rodney Ellis
Yes.
was talking about? That would not have happened if there had not been some kind of commitment to MWBE.
Exactly. So that's an example. So when you think about how we grow our businesses, where are African Americans going to be able to grow their businesses? That's where all the large tranches of money is. That it is in government contracts. It's partnering with nonprofits. But I am going to say this, and this I was the hallelujah chorus over here. We cannot independently go after some of the bigger deals alone. If we don't figure out a way to agree that, hey, can we share this bigger pie together?
Right.
We're going to keep getting these little small crumbs and these little small slices. I can't tell you how many firms, we own our kitchen. We have all the trucks and a food truck and a liquor license. I can't tell you over the last 20 years how many black firms we've tried to say, come to the table. We'll show you how to do this. We'll show you how we can grow this together and partner. And like Rodney said, who's going to be in charge?
There you go.
Who's going to be in charge?
But it's like how I started when I said I literally went to all of these folks, and it was kind of like, I'm doing what none of y'all are doing, and none wanted to partner, and it was just the absolute dumbest thing. And when you're talking about scale, I use the example of John H. Johnson. You're not going to, in this day, you're not going to launch an Ebony, first of all, a Negro Digest, an Ebony and Jet, and you're going to run it for 65 years, and you're going to grow. Because
that dog won't hunt anymore.
It's not going to happen. And guess what happened? John H. Johnson said no to radio. Bob Johnson went to John H. Johnson, wasn't interested. And here's the reality. When John H. Johnson died, the company was not positioned for the future. And yes, it still exists, but it is nothing like what it was. It's gone through now numerous owners because they were not preparing for the next thing. And that's the thing.
So I'm going to finish this one, and I know it's because to your point. So after 20 years, my wife and I were like, how do we partner? So 4 years ago, Hobby Airport came up. Many of you know Hobby, and there's been a lot of legal battles in the news. Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
No,
Papas, not for
the
Tita.
Papas.
We were on 3 different teams at Hobby. Started 4 years ago because we knew maybe catering isn't our future, but being professionals in this business, food service and contracts is what we do. So we were fortunate enough in January, we were awarded one of those contracts that he mentioned. And so we'll have a restaurant at Hobby Airport. It's a branded restaurant. We're going to run a Jersey Mike's at Hobby. So here's the lesson. And I'm going to tell you this. This is my one last lesson in the pitch is that they asked us, one company asked us 3 times to put a Lamont Kitchen. And I said, no, I'm not putting a Lamont Kitchen. You go get me a national brand. We're only going to run, my wife and I, but we only want a national brand. Why? I only need one national brand that I can replicate that brand at other airports. I can put them on the street. It's hard taking your own brand trying to replicate. It's almost impossible. Like, there may not be a Lamont Kitchen 20 years from now, but there's going to be a Lamont Corporation
Right.
that has interest in other businesses. So we have a Jersey Mike's coming our way.
It's like lightning in a bottle. After Mayor Turner, who was actually on his way, we're going to have a conversation with the owner of the Turkey Leg Hut.
Yes.
And that's going to be, the purpose of that conversation is a case study. How to walk through, how do they do what they do? But what they have done is absolutely rare.
It is.
And a lot of people say, man, I want a restaurant. You don't understand how that whole concept works. It's just rare. It's just rare.
It is rare.
It's just
It really is.
All right. I want to go to Ashley because we met, you were doing media stuff in New York.
Yes,
You were working with 50 Cent in G Unit.
this is 50. I have a media background since I was 13 years old, but in New York City, I was on-camera personality since I was 18 years old.
And that's how we met. We were talking. You moved down to Houston. You were still trying to do media and stuff along those lines. And then last time I was here, you said, "Hey, I'm starting this organic company, organic items, and I was like, girl, what you doing?
He was.
So I want you to talk about what was that pivot when you said, you know, I did that for a while, but now I need to go here. I want to do this here. What happened?
You know what's so funny is I think that there wasn't a pivot as a trajectory, because right now I'm sitting here and my goal is to tell you guys about my company, and I don't think I would be able to do it if I wasn't Ashley Ray, who sat and was able to explain or talk about things prior to. But I've been a media personality almost my entire life. Mami Wada Organics was started in my kitchen. In 2016, I put myself on a challenge to learn something new once a month, to focus on something. I learned ASL, but one of the things that I learned was Ayurvedics and medicinal plants. I got Ayurvedic certified on Groupon.
We ain't talking about weed. We ain't talking about those kind of medicinal plants.
Well, honestly, part of how I learned...
Just checking. Okay.
Yes, actually. Part of how I learned how to do extractions was I started with bud first, if I'm being completely honest with you. Because it is the same process for taking the medicine from plants.
Got it.
It's the same exact thing. But after learning that, a couple years later, I was in a space where I just was not healthy. I was 60 pounds overweight. I was aged. I just didn't feel good. I was sluggish. I wasn't able... I also lived a life where I slept about 5 hours a night, which wasn't good either, but I just was not in a good space.
Girl, that's a lot.
Right? And nowadays... But so in 2018, I went back to what I learned in 2016, and I said, let's expand upon that. My hair's falling out. How do I get that to grow without using products that are on shelves that have chemicals in them? So I started learning about hair products. I started learning about our Koji skin salt is for skin brightening. But I will tell you, so when I first started, I said, let's start with weight loss. Right? So my first product is the Goddess Elixir. At the time, my blood pressure was very high. My doctor had put me on blood pressure medicine. I started going through the books. I said, what herbs if you take them medicinally daily in low doses, would help with blood pressure? Because blood pressure medicine is bad for your liver. Your liver, without it being processed properly, messes with your digestion. All these things just knock years off your life. So the goal was to cleanse my liver, and vain, it was to lose weight for on camera. So when I started looking at the right plants and fenugreek and learning about what turmeric does when you do, and also dosing. I'm currently in class for medicinal medicine at Cornell, and hopefully by the time we launch 8/4, I will be done with that class. But I came up with a tea mix first, and that product, I took it for 21 days at first. I started, in that first time, I lost 17 pounds in the first 21 days of using it.
Sign me up.
Yeah, right? But that's not the only thing that happened. I had gone to the doctor previously, before that, and found out that my blood pressure was going high. They put me on a blood pressure medicine, and I no longer take that medicine. Because of the Goddess Elixir. So once the weight started to fall off, within 5 months, I lost 60 pounds. I also I had made a 180 lifestyle change as well, which is what we teach you. What MWO, I teach people what I learned, basically. So once that started happening, the weight started coming off so fast, I started having things like discoloration, skin tightening, and all this kind of stuff. Things was hanging in places that it wasn't supposed to be hanging. So I said, how do we fix that with plants? And I started looking at cosmetics, and everything that's bad for you in the cosmetics is the preservatives, and the things that they use for you to be able to keep it in your cabinet. So I said, how do we make this without adding that? So all of our products, including our Koji skin salt, which is an additive that you add to our rue and saffron oil, which our rue and saffron oil, you combine the two, and there is a brightening and skin tightening that happens on an as-needed basis. So you aren't always putting harsh chemicals on your body, or chemicals at all when you use our products. And these are spot treatments. If I feel like I'm losing a little bit too much weight, I will make a rest on my products. But I rotate them. I on an as-needed basis, because I find that a lot of times if we're using something, I got a little something here, I'll put a chemical on my body that you don't know that because you're the consumer, that you're only supposed to use that for 21 days. So you're using it for 60, and your skin, black people, we have a barrier that white people don't. So it's doing something to your skin that it wouldn't do for others. So that's basically the basis of my business. We have 16 products total. We're gonna launch with 4 on August 4th of this year. And I can't even believe that Roland, I have no idea, he called me and said on Tuesday, you wanna do a panel? I was like, okay. He sent me the flyer last night. I hyperventilated for a little while, but I showed up, I'm here now. I also wanna know who is the bad one
What do you mean?
of the two of y'all?
My goodness.
Who was the troublemaker?
Oh, you know.
That's easy.
That's
I
not
thought
even
so. I just was,
Trust me,
I
Ashley.
didn't,
Actually,
okay.
that wasn't even a question. Trust me.
That's easy. That's easy. I ain't got no problem with trouble.
I will say though, I was lured to Houston by a nonprofit and a serial entrepreneur. I've seen Texas entrepreneurs from a sideline view. My significant other he's actually coming up on his 10-year anniversary for his small business here, and he's barely 30. He's in his lower 30s. So that just tells you what a business can do here in Texas, and he's thriving. He's on his 3rd business, actually. Serial entrepreneur. So I got to see just the network and the community of people here, and black business owners here, how they support each other. And I'm learning a lot, and I'm super humbled to be here.
See, the thing is, first I'll give it up for Ashley. So when I was talking about doing something this year, and this is actually a precursor to something that's going to be happening next year, which we'll talk about when the mayor comes here. I wanted to focus, the reason I wanted to be on economics is because when I look at all these other events, and I get all these emails and everything, I keep saying, where's the money? And not just where's the money, all of these events that are happening, and a lot of these events, I then go, are black folks benefiting? So a lot of times when I go to stuff, and I'm really that black person, look, I gave a speech to African-American CDFI CEOs Thursday in Clearwater. And they said, well, they'll have transportation for you. And I texted my assistant, I said, is it a black limo company? And she hit me back and she said no. And so, and again, if you ask me the keynote, you don't know what the hell I'm gonna say. And I literally said, I don't know how y'all could be meeting here, but black CDFI CEOs. I said, and y'all didn't attempt to find a black limo company. And it's a consciousness, if you will, when you begin to say who are actually benefiting. And I think, Sonny, one of the things that, again, when I look at Juneteenth, what I keep saying on the show is now that it's a federal holiday, this is truly our thing. Black folk, this our thing. I don't mind other folks showing up. I don't mind, but there was some fools in South Carolina talking, no, this is a unity event. No, we ain't having, this ain't no unity conversation. Because if we get away from what Juneteenth is, but my deal is you cannot talk about Juneteenth and freedom if you ain't talking about the money. You can't. And I think that's a huge mistake. And I just think that for a lot of our folks, we also, and I want you to speak to this, which all of you actually spoken to, this notion of how we also keep playing small. Yeah. You've dealt with this with other black newspapers. Talk about all these years dealing with other black papers. You were doing stuff, running TV commercials and radio commercials and billboards, and they look at you, what you doing? They were still playing small, and the problem today, them playing small for so many years, now that the industry has shifted, now they really are small. And so talk about that pivot moment where the industry was changing, where you said, how I used to play, I can't play like this in the future in order to still survive.
The bottom line is audiences are changing. Where they get their information is different than it was 20, 40 years ago when I first got into the business. By the way, the Defender's celebrating 92 years, and you don't just last 92 years for just shucking and jiving, okay? So with that, though, I think the elephant in the room, Roland, is what I call the trifecta. Black people doing business with black people, which is what you were talking about when you said the black limo piece. You know, we always kind of shove that aside and talk about public and private sector, but black folks, you got to do business with black people because those are the people who are employing black people. Two is the public and private sector. You heard Commissioner Ellis talk about the public sector and the fact that Harris Health is at 0%. Port of Houston is at 5%, Metro is at 3%. And I may have the percentages wrong, but when you add all of them up, it's less than 6%. That's right. So my point being is that we as a community, you flip to the private sector. In the Wall Street Journal yesterday, you know, Byron Lewis was on his church, and they were writing an editorial about the big...
About Byron Allen.
Byron Allen,
Right,
sorry.
right.
I'm thinking Byron Lewis for some reason.
I got you.
Byron Allen, there was an editorial in the Wall Street Journal about the Big Mac attack, in which he is personally attacking McDonald's for $10 million lawsuit. And in some cases, it's really self-serving, but when you flip the switch, what you do speaks louder than what you say. And I think corporate America has to step up and look at, if black folks are doing a certain percentage of volume of your profit margin or your bottom line, you should be doing that percentage of business with those black people. And that idea has, and I think that's
Right.
part of the elephant in the room. The other flip side of that is our tax dollars. You pay taxes. What's happening to your tax dollars? They're not even spending money with your people.
There you
so
go.
the question becomes, how do we as a community, and I don't have the answer, but God knows if before I close my eyes, somebody can come up with an answer, I'll be right there with them. How do we as a community leverage what we have, our tax dollars, our consumer dollars, in a way that we get the recognition from these corporate, both public and private sector entities to say we deserve our fair share of those dollars?
Well, again, I think one of the things what you talked about there, and we literally just agreed to this, for the last 2 years, we have been in negotiation, in discussion, numerous meetings with McDonald's. Last week, we agreed to a 3-year, 7-figure deal. McDonald's is sponsoring this event.
So what you do speaks louder than what you say.
There you go.
They're doing it.
And we are in conversations with Procter & Gamble. There are other companies as well. And the thing that what you laid out is literally the conversation that I've had. We are spending this. We've created this platform. This is how many people are watching. This is how we can access people. We go on and on. And then I say, when I'm seeing your ads on, it's a perfect example. We did a deal with Novo Nordisk, an obesity special in December. I look at other folks, see what they're running, so I'm seeing all of these Anthony Anderson diabetes ads on Fox News.
White media.
I hit them and I said,
Who has more diabetes than us?
precisely.
Yeah.
So one of the brother with them hit me back, and they were like, well, when I saw the line, I knew it came from an agency. It's about scale and reaching customers. I was like, well, first of all, ain't nobody got more diabetes than black people.
Right.
And then the comment was, well, you can. He certainly can reach out to our agency. I'm just saying that really wasn't a quite answer I wanted to receive, but then I said, well, I know exactly who their agency is, and we're going to have that conversation. But I think one of the problems is that we have a generation of people today who literally are afraid to challenge, who literally are afraid to say, look, y'all spending money. Now, we could what they say in Proud Mary, like it nice and easy. We sing it rough. We can have a nice and easy conversation, or we can have a rough conversation.
But we also, Roland, have to be careful of people using other people to position themselves as though they're doing something in the community.
Right.
And because they'll pick off one or two of us.
Oh, absolutely.
And say, hey, y'all, look what we doing in the black
And we
community.
gotta be willing to also call out those one or two when they're fronting. And I just think that where we are right now, post George Floyd.
Yes.
And Reggie, you and I were having a conversation last night.
I was going to comment about that.
There were corporations pledged anywhere from 30 to 300 billion, and I warn folk, don't let that become a press release. At a meeting with General Motors, their then CMO, Deborah Wall, I said, let me explain something to y'all. I ain't praising y'all for a press release. I'm going to praise you for direct deposits.
So to Roland's point, and I really can't stress, you really have to take the words Commissioner Ellis said earlier, is that we can do all this work. We can make all this sacrifice. We can create all this opportunity, but you got to be ready to perform. We aren't going to be able to take advantage of those opportunities unless we're very strategic about our partnerships, understanding how we need to be prepared to do those contracts. So I was fortunate enough to be in some conversations with Starbucks about 6 months ago. They have one of these commitments to spend, they want to get to $1.5 billion annually with people of color. They spend about half of that right now. And in my initial conversations, I met the first couple of times and I said, well, you all don't franchise Starbucks. So I can't get a Starbucks to a franchise. I don't know too many black companies that grow coffee, like the beans. We don't make the plastic cups or the straws. So they kept asking me to come back and asking me to come back because this was a supplier opportunity to basically run one of their tier 1 sandwich manufacturing facilities. Big business, big opportunity. And I kept saying, you know, I don't think we're ready to scale. And they kept saying, no, we want you to keep, they wanted me to bid this process. And I'm glad I did because I learned. It forced me to go find other partners because then I learned that they're not going to hit that number. They're not going to hit $1.5 billion.
Nope.
There's no way unless I go find capital investors who's going to put up $100 million to build a state-of-the-art plant, because here's what they tell you. Remember when I tell you about my catering company, I went and spent all money on all those trucks and stuff? Starbucks will give you a contract, but it's not a contract to sustain you.
Boom.
So they told me that I needed, they would be my primary contract.
Right.
But then I had to go find other contracts to sustain the investment into the manufacturing facility.
Yeah.
Which in your case, as you start to scale and manufacture, because you got all the safety requirements, the FDA requirements, the OSHA requirements.
Go ahead.
Before you get into the Sigma 6 best practices, right? So go ahead.
I just want to say, because I'm listening to you guys right now, is that what I'm finding, especially for black female business owners, there are a lot of opportunities where companies want to give you money right now if you are a black female business. And about not playing small, don't play small. There are companies that products to use every single day in your house that want to represent you even because, like she said, the media platforms are changing. They want to see content. They want to see you putting what you put in the diaper that you put on your child's butt. Like, you know, whatever you're using, daily products. Procter & Gamble, they're all ready to give money to black female business owners. Do not play yourself small. Look for their branding schedules and submit yourself.
Now be careful, because when they give you money, they give you money that is designated for key things, which means they will give you a contract, okay? But they do not give you money for operations or sustainability.
Yes.
So a lot of black folks who have good
And
businesses.
marketing. A lot of
because you may have a great product, but if you can't market it, who knows about
there are
it?
there are a lot of black companies that have gotten deals with the Walmarts of the world, and they're like, we're going to put you in, okay, you did great in 100 stores. We're not going to scale you. We're not going to put you in 1,000 stores. Well, the problem is, if you're not telling folk my product's there, and they're going, product ain't moving. And what you've now done, you've now scaled up to meet the 1,000-store demand, and if the product ain't moving, you now stuck with a whole bunch of product ain't nobody bought.
A lot of overhead.
A whole lot of overhead.
And out of business.
There you go. And so that's why I'm always telling people, and of course, Sonny, we deal with this in the media side, where they come, because like one company came to me and they said, well, here's a $500,000 advertising contract, but we need 12 million impressions. I said, ain't no way in hell we gonna hit 12 million. Straight up. Let's see that. I'm saying.
See, they're basing our industry on what the white industry is.
There you go.
And it's two different kinds of markets. We're talking about the quality of the audience. They're talking about the quantity of the
There you
audience.
go.
And that's two different things. But one of the things I want to touch on, they're both Roland and Reggie. I just met you, Ashley, though. One of the things is that credibility and respectability is earned by service. And one of the things I can say, I've seen Reggie in the vineyard, and he's over Houston First, and he's making sure that tourism, as far as the dollars that are spent with black folks too. And so to me, because of that service, you gain the respect in the industry. Roland has been in the vineyard helping a lot of young journalists. I can remember when you and Krissa and Rashonda all started out with me, and now all of y'all are big time. My point being is that take time as business people to help the young people come up. Take time to invest in your community, because as Matt Hanna told me, you can't help folks till you help yourself. So once you help yourself, remember to reach back and help some more folks.
I'm getting first in line. We're going to get to know each other.
So with that, we're going to do this here. We're going to take a pause in this panel because our mayor just walked in, Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner, appropriately dressed for the heat. They have the Juneteenth parade, so what we're going to do is we're going to swap panel out. I still want y'all just to chill out there, because I do have a couple more questions for y'all. But I got you. So, Mayor, I want you to step on up. Mayor Sylvester Turner, put your hands together first. Our panel. No. First of all, you dressed appropriately. No, coming right here. Coming to Houston, we understand heat. So I wore one of my African outfits. In fact, Lynn from a Turkey Leg Hut called me. He said, "Hey man, what's the dress? Cause you know it's hot." I said, "Doc, it don't matter." I said, "You come dressed like a chef." He said, "Cool, linen works. So when he sees you, he gonna be real happy."
Well, I am certainly dressed down today.
No.
So,
This is how we roll the Black Star Network. We good with that. All right, glad to see you here, Mayor. First off, I wanted to have this conversation because you're in your final months as mayor. This is about the future of economic freedom for African Americans.
Right.
And Commissioner Ellis spoke earlier. He got spawned. He came in for all y'all got here, so he had a mic first. And we talked about literally the billions of dollars that exist out here in the public sector. And unfortunately, we're not fully tapping into that. You understood that coming into the mayor's office. And so what was your focus to make sure that black folks were getting a piece of this pie when we are significant tax payers in the city?
well, Roland, I looked at it in two ways. Certainly, the people in our city need the services. You know, the basic services, and you want to make sure that you're improving every community, every neighborhood, so every neighborhood is a community of promise and hope. So services are important. But secondly, economic empowerment, because that is what will last far beyond my term. Making sure, for example, that we're providing opportunities for businesses, to add capacity and then to be able to scale. They can then hire, and then that continues, okay? So that was critically important. Number two, the city of Houston, for example, our budget, we just passed the budget a week or two ago, $6.2 billion. And then that doesn't necessarily factor in everything that we're spending, for example, like at the airports and our utility system, all of that. So it's a lot more than that. So it was very, very important when you say that you're the most diverse city in the country, that diversity be reflected beyond just ethnicity, but in terms of where those economic dollars are going. I will, and I am proud to say that in my term in office, that we have done more businesses with MWSBEs, and more so than any time in the history of this city. And if you drill that down, just say we just want to focus on African American businesses, we have awarded more business in dollars and cents to African American businesses at a historic level, more than any time in the history of this city. And so you're talking about just for black businesses, African American businesses, you're talking about nearly $1 billion going specifically just to African American businesses.
Wow.
Okay. So, and if I wanted to be exact, you're talking about $927 million.
I like specifics.
Yeah, I'm talking about $927 million, and that's just up to 2022. That's not factoring in this last year.
And the reason that's important, and we talk about this here, because when you talk about that much, 927 million going to black businesses, now you're talking about companies that have employees, folks who are buying houses. When we had my TV One show, the weekly show was 4 years and the daily show was 4 years. The sister who did the makeup,
Yes.
she came when the show was over. She was in tears, and she says, "Roland, I got to thank you." I was like, "So why?" She said, "Doing makeup for your show allowed me to buy my first house." And that's, and here's what by her doing makeup on our show, she's the makeup artist for Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Wow.
So when you saw the judge in Vogue,
Yeah.
she did her makeup.
Wow.
So when we talk about creating opportunities for black-owned businesses, you're creating not just that opportunity, but what's coming down the road, and now houses, sending kids to college, them giving to HBCUs, and so that 927 million is not just going to one person.
Right. It's the multiplier effect. And look, when I came in as mayor in January 2016, we had 2,500 certified MWSB businesses, 2,500. As of today, we now have a little more than 5,200. We have more than double.
Wow.
More than double. And if you want to drill that down to African American businesses, of that 5,200, 40% of them are African American businesses. 40% of them. So we've more than doubled the number of certified businesses. We have given out more contracts in dollars and cents to MWSBEs than in the history of this city. We are working on building capacity. That's just the city. After the murder of George Floyd, there were a number of us, African American primarily, entrepreneurs and businesses, that started the Houston Social Justice and Economic Equity Fund. And partnering with various corporations and banks, in this case Wells Fargo, which ended up giving $20 million to the Houston Social Justice and Economic Equity Fund. We have provided grants anywhere from $10,000 to $60,000 to more than 220 businesses, minority businesses in this city. And we're getting ready in the second round to provide another $8 million. We decided that the 10 to 60,000 was not high enough. And so we've increased that threshold. These are not loans. These are grants that are being provided to businesses themselves. So, it's, I am proud of that because, services, we have to provide services. But economic empowerment and feeding into these businesses, and for most of these businesses, you're talking about less than 10 employees or less. But the goal is to build capacity and to enable them to scale up. And then for some of them who need technical assistance, they can now go online and get technical assistance 24/7 that we are offering to these businesses. So we want to help in so many different ways.
See, the thing, I had a conversation, we were in D.C., and they kept talking about, black-owned businesses, we need access to capital. I said, no, we need contracts.
Right.
I said, it don't mean nothing for me to have access to capital, credit line, if I don't have contracts. And so we were in this battle. I said, because for me, I built this, we have no debt, we owe nobody. I said, I'm gonna have capital if I get contracts. And that's the thing that people have to understand. And then you have the people out there that say, well, we want to create, back-end services, legal support. I say, hey, I got a lawyer, an accountant, we got all that. Where the contracts?
Well, look, when you start looking at construction, professional services, and goods and products, over 7+ now years, coming up on 8, we have 29% on average are going to these MWSBEs, 29%. And the way we do it, I mean, we have these goal levels every Thursday morning in the executive committees. As we're going down the agenda, we go through each item to see whether or not these companies and others are meeting their goals that we have set. If they're not meeting those goals, we pretty much pull them, okay? And so you need to meet these goals. But at the same time, we're not just trying to promote MWSBEs as subs. We are now very intentional with promoting them as prime. And so now we allow MWSBEs who are primes to account for 50% of those goals so that they can build that scale and add that capacity. So we're now seeing more MWSBEs who were serving as subs who are now stepping in as primes. And again, that's just a way of building in our communities, putting people in a position to hire folk, lasting way beyond whoever is mayor. You want these businesses to continue to survive and thrive and grow.
See, I think that was the key point you made, and I said this when Obama was president. I said, guys, look, when you term limit, that's it. You're only there 8 years, finite years. But to your point, these are businesses that can be here 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 years and is having the opportunity. The prime contract piece is so critically important because that's what Maynard Jackson had to deal with when he became mayor of Atlanta. And what happened there was we were always forced, and the way the rules are, I covered City Hall when I was in Fort Worth. The moment you become a prime just one time, you can now bid on other prime contracts.
Absolutely.
So the system was set up that we were only subprime. We could only become subprime contractors. And so what he did was they broke up a lot of the contracts to smaller contracts and said, no, we're not going to do one big prime.
Debundle.
Right, and now you have, so versus 100 million, no, we're going to do 20, 20, 20, 20, 20. And now, if they can apply to become a prime in one of the 20s,
right,
they now can apply for that, another deal, for that 100 or 500 or whatever.
And you know what else we were finding? We were finding that, let's say, if 24% of that contract was supposed to go to MWSBEs, well, when you look at that 20%, they may have had 8 different subs. One getting 1%, 2%, maybe 3%, to add up to that 24%. Well, hell, you can't build capacity when somebody's getting 1%, 2%. They'll always be at that level. So we said, no, that's not working here. That's not working here. And so you've got to provide people with the opportunities where it's a meaningful, impactful opportunity. Otherwise, you're not really doing anything at all. And then you just can't get to the point where you're putting people down and you're not utilizing them. So you're putting them down to get the business, but you're not utilizing them. Or you're saying, well, we put them down, but they couldn't do the work. You know, no, that's not going to work at all. So it's letting people know that we're looking at everyone. I don't care who you're doing business with. And I'm not interested in the names. I'm simply interested in the fact that you are giving meaning to the program, okay? And that's what's important. And you're utilizing people that can do the work. Now, when you go to Hobby, we had a big deal over this airport contract at Hobby. But when you look at Hobby as a prime sort of contract, on one of those contracts, you had MWBEs in it that represented about, what, 97% of the deal. That's on one of the major ones, okay? So it's affording people opportunities. And then what I say to people all the time is that, you have people sitting at the table, and people will say, well, let's focus on people who have had the previous experience, and they've been doing it, and let's look at them. Well, everybody started somewhere. Everybody started somewhere. And so if you're only utilizing folk who have been at the table, then there are no new people sitting at the table. So everybody started somewhere. And in this sense, I borrowed the philosophy from my daddy. You know, when you have 9 kids and 2 adults and a kitchen table that only sit 5 people at a time, and my daddy wanted everybody in the house eating at the table. So he would say, okay, you 5, y'all go in there and y'all go eat. And, you know, your mama got plenty of food, so don't rush, you know. So go sit in there for 5 of you. And then when my daddy thought you had been at the table long enough, my daddy would walk into the kitchen and tap you on your shoulder. And he said, now you 5, y'all been sitting here long enough. There are another 5, so waiting to eat. So you 5, you get up. And you know, that stuck with me.
He was a maitre d' at a restaurant. We got to flip this table.
But, you know, but when you're living in the most diverse city in the United States, as long as everyone believes that they will have an opportunity to sit at the table, you're not going to have a lot of fuss and confusion, because everybody knows they will have their turn. The problem when you have that you will have is that if there are people who've been sitting at the table and they don't want to leave the table,
Yep.
and there are others who are saying, when is it my turn?
And it's opportunity. I was at a black contractors convention. I gave a keynote several years ago in D.C. And there was a sister I met, and her job was to certify companies to make sure
Right.
they actually were minority owned. And she came upon this company in North Carolina, and they were the largest construction company in North Carolina. So she was talking to these 2 guys. They said, well, how did this company get started? He said, well, our dad started this company. He was in the military. And they said that when the war was over, World War II, he asked them, well, you know, we got all this surplus equipment.
Right.
Can I just keep some of this? And, oh, yeah, go right ahead. So he started this construction company with a government handout. Military construction company, military construction equipment, and used that equipment to start the company, and then began to get all these contracts in North Carolina. And now his sons are running the company that Daddy started using government equipment. And as she and I were talking, I've used that example. I said, because you can't show me a black soldier who they will let walk off the base even with a shovel.
Right.
But he left with actual equipment. The government funded his business. And so I explained to a lot of white folks out here, I don't want to hear that bootstrap stuff when the reality is for decades and even when we were paying taxes,
Right.
we were funding their contracts, their businesses.
Right.
And right now, in this whole age, folk fighting CRT, I got my book over there, White Fear, how the browning of America is making white folks lose their minds. Folk getting all upset and everything, and you're going, look at the numbers. Y'all been eating well for a long time, and now you get mad because we're saying, can we get a chair at the table to eat?
But you know, Roland, what I would say though, yes, people get mad. But we can't do what they do. And what I mean by that, we have to cross every T. We have to dot every I. I came in fully aware that everything that we do with me as mayor was going to be scrutinized. And so you have to dot every I, you have to cross every T, you have to be even more intentional with following the process. Because when you start saying, providing more opportunities for people that look like you and I, or people who are diverse, everybody's not going to be pleased with that or happy with that. So we have to be extra careful. Extra. In order for you to sleep at night, You have to be extra careful knowing that you have crossed the T's and dotted the I's and followed the process, because it may not be fair, but that's just the way it is.
Yep.
So that's what I tell mayors across the country, okay? Make sure that you're following your process. Make sure that you have 2 and 3 different checks, because that's so important. But at the same time,
Somebody checking on the checker and the checker.
and everyone, people will tell you, and in all of our meetings, in my 8 years, number one, I never meet with anybody by myself. That's number one. Number two, we discuss all of my deals before my executive meeting. We go through every last one of them. If there's something that seems out of
See,
whack,
Mayor, you sound like a preacher on that one. I ain't gonna name the preacher, but that was a woman who wanted to go to counseling. And she came in, and there were 2 other people in the room. It was a dude, it was a brother, it was a woman. And she says, she goes, Pastor, I thought I was doing counseling with you. He said, no, darling, they're paid not to open their mouth. And she's like, but this is supposed to be a meeting between you and I. He said, we will not be meeting if the 2 of them are not in the room.
and I will tell you, and I came in with that rule. Thing meeting just with me, because whatever you have to say, you can say to all of us. And if you can't say it to all of us, you can't say it to me.
So somebody say, no, the mayor told me, you like, I had some backup in the room.
There are at least going to be 2 or 3 other folk. And especially when we are discussing anything dealing with awarding, that's in front of my entire executive team. Because I mean that's just the nature. Those are just the realities. Those are realities. But having said all of that, we've made significant progress. I won't say mission accomplished, but it is important for us to do everything we can to build capacity, to put the business in a way that they can scale up. And then what I say to businesses, you need to be able to do the business. I can't put you someplace and you can't do it. Now let's not be crazy now. I mean, you're applying for something, and the people are asking, can you do this? No. Do you have this? No. Why are you down here? Well, I'm an MWBE. So what you want me to do? So we can't help you if you're not taking the steps to help yourself. Okay? Now, that's one of the reasons why we put a lot of emphasis on apprenticeship programs. So there are steps that we can take you through, like on the small business rotation program that we have. We can take you through those steps on technical assistance, financial assistance, all of those, to build you to that point. And then you go to the next step and to the next step. But the Office of Business Opportunity, I want to give a lot of credit to Marsha Murray, sister, who has just done an incredible job in the Office of Business Opportunity. And all of my directors, that's important, because quite frankly, before the matters even get to me, I'm on the back end. They have come through the system. So you got to have the right people in the right place in order to move things forward.
Well, speaking of moving forward, last year, again, after Juneteenth last year, folks were celebrating the first year being a federal holiday.
Yeah.
And I was seeing all these different events and stuff, folks doing stuff. Then I started seeing all the planning, and I said, we got to make sure that Houston remains the epicenter in terms of national celebration. CNN last year did
California.
Did something from the Hollywood Bowl. They broadcasted it again from the Greek Theater. And I was like, I said, how y'all gonna broadcast a concert from California?
About Juneteenth.
Hell, when they entered the Union, they didn't even have slavery. So I had this idea, And then reached out to my brother, reached out to different people in Houston. I said, Mayor, we've got to make sure. And so we began to meet with different folks, met with the folks over at Houston First. And so I am proud to announce with the mayor that beginning next year, we're going to be holding the National Juneteenth Freedom Festival here in Houston. Black Star Network, my partners with Urban Edge Network. Our goal is to have our exhibits, have concerts, bring our tourists in, but really make Houston the centerpiece of Juneteenth celebrations, because that's the way it should be, and everything coming from here.
And look, and let me thank you, Roland. You reached out. We want to be fully supportive. You know, I saw that last year. You know, you try not to be jealous or envious or whatever. But you know, I said CNN going to L.A. talking about Juneteenth. I mean, I was at my home and I said, what the hell? I mean, that's fine. But you can't ignore the fact that General Granger came to Galveston and on that veranda read Article 3. And you can't ignore the fact that after he read it, and quite frankly, before he got to the last line, those slaves, some of them are already taken off, you know, heading down to Freedmanstown to 4th Ward. And then when he finished it, the others, well, there were some, because even when they were told that they was free, you know, just the words don't set you free.
Right.
You got to set your mind free.
Right.
So there were some who were still standing still after the man said y'all free. You know, so many of them stayed at Galveston, but the rest of them took off. And so how can you ignore that? And then I got to give my brother, good friend, former state representative,
Yes, sir.
Al Edwards.
Yes, sir.
I got to give him a lot of credit, because Al took a lot of crap in the legislature.
Well, I was in D.C. Tuesday for the Juneteenth concert at the White House. His son was there, and saw Opal Lee there, gave her respect. I told a whole bunch of people there, I said, let me be real clear. I said, first of all, y'all, this was a state holiday in Texas first. I said, and it was my Alfred brother, Representative Al Edwards, and I said, let's not lose sight that it was a whole bunch of folk for years and decades who were saying it should be a federal holiday.
Right. So I certainly want to acknowledge Al Edwards, because if we are not careful, we will rewrite our own history.
And that's precisely why I said, no, we got to do this thing. National festival in Houston, multi-event. Whether we
want it done big.
Oh yeah.
Now I won't be the mayor next year when it happens, but I can certainly help feed the success of the program.
Yes, sir.
While I'm here, I don't know who the next mayor will be, but I know that I'm the mayor right now. So we're already planning to assist for next year.
Yes, sir. And so when I was in D.C. And I pulled Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee aside, and I mentioned this, she goes, now you know I'm sponsoring this Juneteenth trail, and they got all this stuff. Don't leave me out. I was like, Congresswoman, I got you. Breathe. I said, breathe. I'm not gonna leave you out. I was like, breathe. So I told her, I said, don't worry about it. I said, it's all good. Take your time. But
thank you, Roland.
Yeah,
thank you for what you're doing.
But the whole point of this is absolutely to make it big, to make it national, and make sure those morning shows are broadcasting from here, and then when we're telling the story, but not just telling the story, getting people to understand the locations, Freedmanstown,
right.
Emancipation
Right.
Park, all of that history there, because you're right, my fear, and I've been telling everybody, don't just be having concerts.
Right.
Because normally we say it's a party with a purpose. We're flipping this. This festival is going to be a purpose with a party.
Right.
And economic freedom is going to be a part of
Right.
that. And that's why we definitely want to do it here and keep it here. So I appreciate, your support for it, and we're looking forward to doing it up.
Well, you know, you're placing your name on it, and you know you got that national name. You know, you started with the Defender, you know, and now you got that national brand. So we want to take advantage of that national brand to now redirect the attention
Oh, yeah.
to this particular region,
And there are a
Houston,
number of
Galveston.
national brands that are very interested in being sponsors as well.
Right.
So we definitely, so we're talking about exhibits. We're talking about having
Right.
different, all that stuff happening on Friday and Saturday, in addition to having the concerts, in addition to having empowerment panels and discussions, lectures, things along those lines. And we want it to really be centered in a huge, as we talk about here, a major part. It will be utilizing African American vendors and companies and wanting them out to showcase their wares, because that's, for me, and I keep telling everybody, Juneteenth for us was not about just barbecue.
Right.
We had voter registration taking place at Juneteenth
Right.
events. We had economic discussions.
Right.
So when we talk about freedom, we're talking about freedom.
And all of those issues are as pertinent today as they were 100 years ago. And in many, many ways, they're even more relevant and more pertinent. And information is empowerment.
Yep.
And if we don't make sure that we educate ourselves and those that are coming after us, then we are shortchanging our future. And you don't want to do that. So let's party, but at the same time, information is highly important and is relevant today. And so
Absolutely.
we want to make sure that we are working with you and providing the necessary support, because either you go big or you go home. And if you can't do it on a Houston scale, and I think that may be one of the reasons why they went to LA. Maybe people felt the Hollywood, that imagery and, maybe entertainers and stuff. And so they're looking at it from the Hollywood perspective. And then they say, well, General Granger, Galveston, Houston.
But see, for me, that's always a problem. If you only want to focus on the Hollywood angle, but you want to leave the history out, then all it ends up being is just a concert.
But we can do the history, and we can
Right.
give you Houston Hollywood.
No!
Right here.
Let me real, just so folks know, I've already put out my calls to connect with Beyonce, Megan Thee Stallion, Lizzo,